theory of stigma. I mean, we all think we know what stigma is, and we do. We have blame for being HIV infected, and we've certainly heard from the prior speakers about how that affects disclosure and all sorts of other things in relation to care and access to care. But in its particular form, it manifests as bad reputation, as prejudice against people with HIV, as social ostracism, I can't get it out this morning, social isolation for people who are diagnosed and if people know about that diagnosed, and sort of just general avoidance. And that is particularly harsh in the rural south. But we also see a different sort of stigma that is really quite structural. And by that I mean that has come from way back and is historical and has affected how people think about HIV disease today. And we see that in, say, conspiracy theories, and we know what they are. We hear things like HIV was caused by the US government. In other words, the stories I hear are, and I hear them from people around here as well as the broader US, is that the US government introduced HIV in infected needles in California gangs, and that's how it became introduced to the African American community. We hear how stigma affects one's willingness to take seek health care and especially to have blood drawn and things like that. So dislike of needles, I mean, why is that a stigmatised issue? Well, coming out of the Tuskegee syphilis study that went on from 1932 to 1972, in which 399 African American men were studied, and I think about 100 died for the natural course of from syphilis. Out of that, there was some blood drawing, and out of that came stigma around needles, because if anybody wanted to draw blood from you, then you associated that with scientific racism. And then we hear stigma around condoms. You might think that condoms are readily available in Alabama, but there's a lot of stigma against condoms. We hear this from religious entities saying that you shouldn't use condoms because, they prevent, you should have abstinence rather than condom use in terms of HIV prevention. So stigma. And then we have homophobia. I shouldn't forget that, because that's essentially what I'm going to focus on today. And that comes from way back, biblical mandates to have heterosexual relations and not to engage in same-sex activities. So a theory of stigma also extends to denial of a problem. We deny that we have HIV in the South, as I just was discussing with a couple of people during the break. And we have distrust of mainstream medicine. Now, when it comes to African Americans, and I will talk primarily about that because that's mainly my research focus, is that you have a lot of people, I would say not less women than men, who really distrust mainstream medicine. Not surprising coming out of the Tuskegee syphilis study.